Chapter 1. The Unsettling Discovery. The late afternoon sun cast a warm, golden hue over the college campus as John, his wife Sarah, and their youngest son Ryan walked away from the dormitory. It was a bittersweet moment. They had just moved Ryan into his new home for the next 4 years. Sarah, ever the emotional one, fought back tears as they strolled towards the parking lot. "I can't believe our boys are grown up already," said Emily, their neighbor whose son was also moving into the same dorm. She dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. Sarah took a napkin from Emily, wiping away her own tears. "Yes, it's as hard to believe," she replied, her voice trembling. "Now they have to make so many decisions on their own." John's mind was elsewhere. He had a major decision of his own to make, one that had been festering for nearly a decade. Doubts crept in as he fumbled for his car keys, pretending to search for them in his pockets. Sarah reached for his hand, but he dodged it, feigning distraction. "John, it is okay," Sarah murmured, sensing his unease. "I understand what you're going through. If only she knew." As they reached the parking lot, John's thoughts drifted back to the day he had discovered the truth. It was almost 10 years ago, shortly after their 10th wedding anniversary. He had received a padded envelope in the mail, a seemingly innocuous package among the usual bills and junk mail. Inside, he found a smaller manila envelope addressed to Sarah, containing a letter and several photographs. "Dear Sarah," the letter began, "I hope this finds you well and happy." John's heart had raced as he read the words, his mind spinning with confusion and anger. The letter was from Kyle, a former neighbor known for his drinking and dubious photography hobby. As John examined the photos, he realized they depicted Sarah, 10 years younger, in revealing poses and intimate positions. The outfit she wore in the photos was familiar, a tight blouse and shorts she had worn in a family photo taken around the same time. The realization hit him like a ton of bricks. Sarah had been unfaithful, and Kyle had documented the affair. John had kept this discovery to himself for years, unsure of how to confront Sarah or what to do next. But now, with Ryan off to college and the house feeling emptier than ever, he knew it was time to take action. As they reached the car, Emily hugged Sarah tightly. "We'll get through this, Sarah. Our boys are strong." "Thank you, Emily," Sarah replied, smiling through her tears. "We should get together for coffee soon." John managed a tight smile as he unlocked the car. The drive home was silent, the weight of his secret pressing down on him. That evening, after dinner, he retreated to his home office. The photos and letter from Kyle were hidden in a locked drawer, but tonight he needed to see them again. He pulled out the envelope, his hands trembling as he spread the photos across his desk. Each image was a dagger to his heart, a painful reminder of Sarah's betrayal. As he stared at the photos, a terrible thought struck him. What if Ryan wasn't his son? The next morning, John took a DNA test kit from a drawer in his bathroom. He had ordered it months ago, unable to shake the gnawing doubt in his mind. He followed the instructions meticulously, swabbing his cheek and sealing the sample in the provided envelope. The wait for the results felt interminable, but when the day finally arrived, John's world was shattered once again. The test confirmed his worst fears. Ryan was not his biological son. John sat at his desk, staring blankly at the DNA test results. His mind raced with questions and anger. How long had Sarah been lying to him? Why hadn't she told him the truth? He felt a surge of rage, mixed with a profound sense of betrayal and heartbreak. That evening, he confronted Sarah. He waited until Ryan had gone out with friends and their eldest son, Chris, was away at college. The house was quiet, and the tension was palpable. "Sarah, we need to talk," John said, his voice steady but cold. Sarah looked up from her book, sensing the gravity of his tone. "What is it, John?" John took a deep breath, his hands clenched into fists. "I know about you and Kyle. I found the photos." Sarah's face went pale and her book slipped from her hands. "John, I can explain." John cut her off, his voice rising. "Explain! How do you explain this?" He threw the photos onto the coffee table, the images splayed out for her to see. Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she looked at the photos. "John, it was a mistake. A terrible mistake. It happened so long ago and I regret it every day." "Regret it?" John spat. "Do you regret that Ryan isn't my son?" Sarah's sobs grew louder. "John, please. I never meant to hurt you. I was so lonely and Kyle was there. It was a moment of weakness." John's heart ached as he watched her cry, but his anger wouldn't let him soften. "A moment of weakness that lasted for how long, Sarah? How many lies have you told me?" Sarah buried her face in her hands, unable to answer. John turned away, his mind made up. He couldn't stay in this marriage built on lies and deceit. The next morning, John called his half-brother Adam, a successful lawyer. They met at Adam's downtown office where John laid out the evidence of Sarah's affair and the DNA test results. "John, this is serious," Adam said, looking through the documents. "But divorcing Sarah will be complicated, especially with the boys involved." John nodded, his resolve firm. "I know, but I can't live like this anymore. I need to know my options." Adam leaned back in his chair, considering. "We can fight for custody and ensure you get a fair settlement. But be prepared for a battle. Sarah won to give up easily." As John left Adam's office, he felt a mixture of fear and determination. The road ahead would be challenging, but he was ready to fight for his truth and his future. That evening, he sat down with Sarah once more. "Sarah, I want a divorce," he said, his voice steady. Sarah's eyes widened with shock and desperation. "John, please, we can work through this. Think of the boys." "I am thinking of the boys," John replied, "and they deserve to know the truth. We can keep living this lie." As the reality of their situation set in, Sarah broke down in tears. John felt a pang of sadness, but he knew this was the only way forward. The truth had to come out, no matter how painful. The following days were a whirlwind of legal preparations and emotional turmoil. John gathered evidence, consulted with Adam, and prepared for the difficult conversations ahead. He knew the road to healing would be long and arduous, but he was determined to reclaim his life and his future. The first step was telling Chris and Ryan the truth. John dreaded the conversation, but he knew it was necessary. He gathered his sons in the living room one evening, Sarah sitting silently beside him. "Boys, there's something important we need to talk about," John began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Your mother and I have decided to get a divorce." Chris and Ryan exchanged shocked glances. "Why?" Chris asked, his voice filled with confusion and hurt. John took a deep breath, looking his sons in the eyes. "There are things you need to know about our family. Ryan, you are not my biological son." The room fell silent as the weight of John's words settled over them. Ryan's face went pale, and Chris's expression turned to anger. "How could you keep this from us?" Chris demanded, his voice shaking with emotion. Sarah reached for her sons, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry. I made a terrible mistake, and I never wanted to hurt you." Ryan's eyes filled with tears as he looked at John. "Does this mean you are not my dad anymore?" John moved to sit between his sons, putting an arm around each of them. "Ryan, I will always be your dad. Blood doesn't change that. I love you both, and nothing will ever change that." As the family sat together, tears and emotions flowing freely, John felt a glimmer of hope. The road ahead would be tough, but they would face it together. And for the first time in years, John felt a sense of liberation, knowing that the truth was finally out. Chapter 2. The DNA Test Revelation. The tension in the house was palpable as John navigated the complexities of his life unraveling before him. The discovery of Sarah's affair had shattered his world, but it was the realization that Ryan was not his biological son that haunted him the most. He felt a strange mix of love and betrayal whenever he looked at the boy he had raised as his own. John's resolve to understand the full extent of Sarah's deceit drove him to conduct a DNA test. He needed to be certain, to have irrefutable proof of what he feared. The kit arrived discreetly in the mail, and John wasted no time. He collected the samples with meticulous care, his hands steady despite the turmoil inside him. The wait for the results was agonizing. John went through the motions of daily life, but his mind was constantly drawn back to the pending revelation. He spent sleepless nights poring over memories, looking for signs he might have missed, wondering how he had been so blind. Finally, the day came. The email notification from the lab appeared in his inbox, and John's heart pounded as he opened it. The results were unequivocal. Ryan was not his biological son. John stared at the screen, the words blurring as tears filled his eyes. His mind raced through a whirlwind of emotions: anger, sorrow, confusion. He felt the weight of betrayal more acutely than ever. How could Sarah have kept this from him? How had he not seen the signs? That evening, John sat alone in his office. The DNA test results spread out on the desk in front of him. He felt a burning need to confront Sarah again, to demand answers, but he knew he needed to be strategic. This wasn't just about his feelings. It was about Ryan and Chris, their future, and the impact this revelation would have on their lives. Sarah found him in the office, sitting in the dim light, staring at the documents. "John?" she called softly, hesitating at the doorway. "Is everything all right?" John looked up, his eyes filled with a mix of sadness and determination. "No, Sarah. Everything is far from all right." She stepped closer, her expression shifting from concern to fear as she saw the papers. "John, what is that?" "It's the DNA test results," he replied, his voice steady but cold. "Ryan is not my biological son." Sarah's face went pale, and she sank into a chair, covering her mouth with her hands. "John, I didn't know for sure. I always hoped." "Hoped?" John interrupted, his voice rising. "You hoped I wouldn't find out? You hoped this lie would stay buried forever?" Tears streamed down Sarah's face as she tried to find the words. "John, I was so scared. I didn't know what to do. I was afraid of losing you, of breaking up our family." John shook his head, the anger and pain clear in his eyes. "You didn't think about what this would do to me, to Ryan, to Chris. You were only thinking about yourself." Sarah's sobs grew louder, but John couldn't bring himself to comfort her. The betrayal was too deep, the wounds too fresh. He needed time to process everything, to decide what to do next. The following days were a blur of emotions for John. He avoided Sarah as much as possible, throwing himself into work and spending time with his sons. He watched Ryan closely, his heart aching with the knowledge that the boy he had raised wasn't biologically his. But Ryan was still his son in every way that mattered, and John vowed to protect him from the fallout of Sarah's actions. One evening, as John was working late in his office, Chris knocked on the door. "Dad, can we talk?" John looked up, grateful for the distraction. "Of course, Chris. What's on your mind?" Chris stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. "It's about Ryan. He's been acting strange lately. I think he knows something's wrong." John sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I know, Chris. It's a lot for all of us to take in." Chris sat down across from his father, his expression serious. "Dad, I know you and Mom are having problems, but Ryan and I need to know what is going on. We deserve the truth." John felt a lump form in his throat. He had hoped to shield his sons from the worst of it, but Chris was right. They needed to know the truth, even if it was painful. "You are right, Chris. You both deserve to know the truth. Let us talk to Ryan together." They found Ryan in his room, hunched over his computer. He looked up as they entered, his expression wary. "What is going on?" he asked, sensing the gravity of the moment. John took a deep breath, trying to steady his voice. "Ryan, there's something very important we need to talk about. It's about our family, and it's going to be hard to hear." Ryan's eyes widened with fear. "What is it, Dad? What's wrong?" John motioned for Chris to sit next to his brother, and he began to explain. He told Ryan about the DNA test, about Sarah's affair with Kyle, and the truth that had come to light. He spoke calmly but honestly, leaving nothing out. Ryan's face went through a range of emotions: shock, disbelief, anger, and finally, sorrow. "So you're not my real dad?" he asked, his voice trembling. John moved to sit beside Ryan, wrapping an arm around his shoulders. "Ryan, I am your dad. Blood doesn't change that. I've raised you, loved you, and I always will. This doesn't change anything between us." Ryan leaned into his father's embrace, tears streaming down his face. "But why, Dad? Why did Mom lie to us? John sighed, wishing he had an easy answer. I don't know, Ryan. Sometimes people make mistakes, and those mistakes can hurt the ones they love. But we are going to get through this, together. Chris reached out and took his brother Seth's hand. Ryan, we are still a family, no matter what. As they sat together, comforting each other, John felt a glimmer of hope. The road ahead would be difficult, but they would face it together, as a family. He would fight for his sons, for their future, and for the truth. Chapter 3. Confrontation and Confession. John's mind was a storm of thoughts and emotions as he tried to find a way forward. The revelations had turned his life upside down, and he knew there was no going back. He needed to confront Sarah once more, to get the answers he deserved, and to set the stage for the inevitable changes that were coming. It was late evening when John finally gathered the courage to speak to Sarah. The house was quiet, with Chris studying in his room and Ryan at a friend S' house. Sarah was in the living room, nervously flipping through a magazine but clearly not reading it. John took a deep breath and walked in, his expression resolute. Sarah, we need to talk, he said, his voice steady but firm. Sarah looked up, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and hope. John, I know you are angry, but please, let's try to work through this. For the boys. John shook his head, his gaze unwavering. This isn't just about anger, Sarah. It's about trust. It's about the lies you've been living for years. I need you to be honest with me, completely honest. Sarah swallowed hard, her hands trembling slightly as she set the magazine aside. I will, John. Ask me anything, and I'll tell you the truth. John sat down across from her, his eyes locking onto hers. How long did your affair with Kyle last? Sarah's face paled, and she looked away, ashamed. It started shortly after Chris was born and lasted for a few months. I ended it when I realized what a terrible mistake I was making. John's jaw tightened, his fists clenching. And you never thought to tell me? You let me believe Ryan was mine all these years? Sarah's eyes filled with tears. John, I was scared. I didn't know how to tell you. I thought I could make it right by being the best wife and mother I could be. John's voice rose with frustration. The best wife and mother? By lying to me every single day? By making me raise another man's child without knowing the truth? Sarah sobbed, her shoulders shaking. I am so sorry, John. I was weak and selfish. I didn't want to lose you. John stood up, unable to sit still any longer. He paced the room, his emotions boiling over. Do you even understand what you've done? You've shattered our family. You've betrayed the trust and love we had. How do we move forward from this? Sarah wiped her tears, trying to compose herself. I know I've hurt you, and I can change the past, but I want to make things right, John. I'll do anything to fix this. John stopped pacing and looked at her, his expression a mix of anger and sorrow. I don't know if this can be fixed, Sarah. I don't know if I can ever trust you again. Sarah stood up, her voice pleading. John, please. We've built a life together. We have 2 wonderful sons. Don't to throw it all away because of my mistakes. John's eyes flashed with pain. Your mistakes? This isn't just a mistake, Sarah. This is a betrayal of the deepest kind. I need time to think, to figure out what's best for me and the boys. He turned and walked out of the room, leaving Sarah standing there, her heart breaking. John needed space, needed to clear his head. He grabbed his jacket and keys and headed out, driving aimlessly through the night, trying to process everything. After hours of driving, John found himself parked by the river, the calm water reflecting the moonlight. He sat there, staring out at the water, his mind a whirlwind of thoughts. How could he ever forgive Sarah? How could he move forward from this? The next morning, John returned home, exhausted but with a clearer mind. He knew he needed to talk to someone, to get advice from someone he trusted. He called his half-brother Adam, and they arranged to meet at a nearby cafe. Adam was already there when John arrived, looking concerned. John, you look like you've been through hell. John sat down with a sigh. It feels like it, Adam. I need your help. I don't know what to do. Adam listened as John recounted everything, the affair, the DNA test, the confrontation with Sarah. When John finished, Adam leaned back, his expression serious. John, this is a tough situation, but you need to think about what's best for you and the boys. Divorce is complicated, especially with the emotions involved, but sometimes it's the only way to move forward. John nodded, his resolve hardening. I know, Adam. I just don't know how to start. Adam leaned forward, his voice calm and reassuring. We'll take it one step at a time. First, you need to gather all the financial documents, proof of the affair, and anything else that might be relevant. Then, we'll talk to a family law attorney who specializes in these cases. We'll make sure you're prepared for whatever comes next. John felt a wave of relief wash over him. He had a plan, and he had Adam's support. It was a start. Thanks, Adam. I don't know what I'd do without you. Adam smiled, clapping a hand on John's shoulder. You are my brother, John. We'll get through this together. With Adam's guidance, John began to gather everything he needed. He spent hours going through files, collecting financial statements, and organizing the evidence of Sarah's affair. It was painful and exhausting, but he knew it was necessary. One evening, as John was going through another stack of documents, Ryan walked into the room. Dad, can I talk to you? John looked up, smiling gently. Of course, Ryan. What is on your mind? Ryan sat down, looking nervous. I've been thinking a lot about what you and Mom told us, about me not being your biological son. John's heart ached, but he kept his expression calm. Ryan, I want you to know that nothing changes how I feel about you. You are my son, and I love you just the same. Ryan nodded, tears welling up in his eyes. I know, Dad, but I can't help feeling different, like I don't belong. John moved to sit beside Ryan, wrapping an arm around his shoulders. You do belong, Ryan. You're a part of this family, and that will never change. Blood doesn't define us. Love does. Ryan leaned into his father's embrace, crying softly. Thanks, Dad. I needed to hear that. As they sat together, John felt a renewed sense of purpose. He would fight for his sons, for their future, and for the truth. And with Adam by his side, he knew he had the strength to face whatever came next. Chapter 4. Seeking Legal Counsel. The weight of recent events hung heavily over John as he walked into the bustling downtown office of his half-brother, Adam. The city's noise seemed distant, muted by the thoughts swirling in his mind. He had always been close to Adam, their bond forged through shared childhood struggles and mutual respect. Today, more than ever, he needed his brother's guidance and support. Adam greeted John with a warm, concerned smile. Hey, John, how are you holding up? John sighed, running a hand through his hair. It's been tough, Adam. I don't even know where to start. Adam led John to his office, a spacious room with large windows overlooking the city. They sat down, and Adam leaned forward, his expression serious. Tell me everything, John. We'll figure this out together. John took a deep breath and began recounting the events that had shattered his life, the discovery of Sarah's affair, the DNA test results, and the confrontations that followed. As he spoke, Adam listened intently, his brow furrowing with concern. When John finished, Adam leaned back, his fingers steepled under his chin. This is a complicated situation, John, but the first thing we need to do is gather all the necessary documentation. Financial records, proof of the affair, anything that will support your case? John nodded, his resolve hardening. I've already started collecting everything, but I don't know what to do next. How do I protect my sons? How do I make sure Sarah doesn't take everything? Adam smiled reassuringly. You are doing the right thing by preparing. The next step is to find a good family law attorney who can guide you through the legal process. I have a colleague, Jessica, who specializes in these kinds of cases. She is tough and highly experienced. I think she can help you. Adam picked up the phone and made a quick call. Within minutes, an appointment was set for John to meet with Jessica the next day. John felt a sense of relief, knowing he had someone knowledgeable on his side. The following morning, John walked into Jessica's office, feeling a mix of anxiety and determination. Jessica, a sharp and professional woman in her 40s, greeted him with a firm handshake. John, Adam has told me about your situation. I'm here to help you navigate through this, Jessica said, her voice calm and confident. John sat down, taking a deep breath. Thank you, Jessica. I don't even know where to start. Jessica smiled, her eyes kind but focused. Let's take it one step at a time. First, tell me everything from the beginning. John recounted his story once more, this time focusing on the details that would be relevant to the case. Jessica took notes, asking pointed questions to clarify certain points. When John finished, Jessica leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. You have a strong case, John. The evidence of the affair and the DNA test results will be crucial. However, we need to prepare for a tough battle. Family law can be complicated, especially when it comes to custody and division of assets. John nodded, his resolve firm. I want to do what is best for my sons. I don't want them to suffer because of Sarah's mistakes. Jessica's eyes softened. I understand. We'll fight for what's fair and make sure your sons are protected. The first step is to file for divorce and request temporary custody. We need to establish a stable environment for Chris and Ryan. Over the next few weeks, John worked closely with Jessica and Adam, gathering documents, preparing affidavits, and planning their legal strategy. It was an exhausting and emotionally draining process, but John felt a sense of purpose. He was fighting for his family, for his sons, and for the truth. One evening, as John was going through another stack of financial records, he received a call from Chris. Dad, can you come over to my dorm tomorrow? I need to talk to you about something important. John's heart skipped a beat, fearing the worst. Of course, Chris. I'll be there first thing in the morning. The next day, John arrived at Chris's dorm, his mind racing with possibilities. Chris greeted him with a serious expression, leading him inside. Dad, I've been doing a lot of thinking, Chris began, sitting down on his bed, about everything that's happened, about Mom, about Ryan, and about us. John sat down beside him, his heart heavy. I know, Chris. It's been a lot to process. Chris looked up, his eyes filled with determination. I want to help. I want to make sure Ryan and I are okay, and I want to support you, but I need to know what's really going on. Are you and Mom getting a divorce? John sighed, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. Yes, Chris. Your mother and I are getting a divorce. It's not something I wanted, but I believe it's the best thing for all of us. Chris nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. I understand, Dad, and I think you are right. But we need to make sure Ryan is okay. He's been really quiet lately, and I am worried about him. John felt a pang of guilt and concern. I know, Chris. I've been trying to support him as best as I can, but it's been hard. We are both struggling with the truth. Chris took a deep breath. Maybe we should get professional help, counseling for all of us. It might help us deal with everything. John felt a surge of pride and gratitude. That's a great idea, Chris. I'll look into it right away. We all need support to get through this. Later that evening, John contacted a family therapist and scheduled an appointment. He knew that talking to a professional would help them navigate the emotional turmoil they were all experiencing. As the legal preparations continued, John found solace in the support of his brother and the determination of his sons. He knew the road ahead would be challenging, but he felt more equipped to handle it with each passing day. One afternoon, as John was organizing documents in his office, Sarah walked in, her expression weary but resigned. John, can we talk? John looked up, his gaze steady. Sure, Sarah, what is it? Sarah sat down, wringing her hands nervously. I know things have been incredibly difficult, and I want to try to make amends. I know I can undo what I've done, but I want to help in any way I can. John felt a flicker of hope, but kept his tone cautious. What do you mean, Sarah? Sarah took a deep breath. I want to cooperate with the divorce proceedings. I want to fight you on custody, and I'll do whatever it takes to make this as smooth as possible for the boys. John's expression softened slightly. I appreciate that, Sarah. The boys' well-being is the most important thing right now. Sarah nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. I know, and I'm truly sorry for everything. I hope one day you can find it in your heart to forgive me. John sighed, his emotions a complex mix of anger, sorrow, and a glimmer of hope. Forgiveness will take time, Sarah. But for now, let us focus on doing what is best for Chris and Ryan. As they continued to navigate the legal and emotional complexities of their situation, John felt a renewed sense of purpose. He was determined to protect his sons and rebuild their lives, one step at a time. Chapter 5. The Revelation to the Children. The air was thick with tension as John and Sarah sat together in the living room, waiting for Chris and Ryan to join them. This was the moment they had both dreaded, but they knew it was necessary. The boys deserved to know the truth, and it was time to tell them. Chris arrived first, his expression curious but wary. Ryan followed close behind, looking anxious and uncertain. John gestured for them to sit down, his heart heavy with the weight of what was to come. "Boys, your mother and I have something important to talk to you about," John began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. Chris and Ryan exchanged glances, sensing the gravity of the situation. "What is it, Dad?" Chris asked, his tone serious. John took a deep breath, glancing at Sarah before continuing. "Your mother and I are getting a divorce." Ryan's eyes widened with shock, while Chris's expression turned to one of anger and confusion. "Why?" Ryan asked, his voice trembling. Sarah reached for Ryan's hand, her eyes filled with tears. "There are things that have come to light, things that have made it impossible for us to stay together. But we both love you very much, and that will never change." John nodded, his gaze steady. "We want to be honest with you both. There's more to the story, and it's important that you understand." Chris leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "What do you mean, Dad? What is going on?" John felt a lump form in his throat as he prepared to deliver the hardest part of the news. "Ryan, you are not my biological son." Ryan's face went pale, and he looked at his parents with a mix of disbelief and fear. "What? What do you mean?" John took Ryan's hand, his voice gentle but firm. "It means that your biological father is someone else. We found out through a DNA test. But I want you to know that it doesn't change anything about how I feel. You are my son, and I love you just the same." Ryan's eyes filled with tears as he struggled to process the information. "Who is my real father?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Sarah took a deep breath, her voice shaking. "His name was Kyle, a neighbor from when you were a baby. He and I had an affair, and that's how you came to be." Chris's expression turned to one of anger and betrayal. "How could you do this to us? How could you lie to us all these years?" Sarah's tears flowed freely as she tried to find the words. "I was scared, Chris. I didn't know how to tell you. I thought I could protect you from the truth, but I see now that it was wrong." John squeezed Ryan's hand, his heart aching for his sons. "We are going to get through this, together. We are getting professional help, and we are going to do everything we can to support you both." Ryan looked up at his father, his eyes filled with uncertainty. "Dad, are we still a family?" John pulled Ryan into a hug, his voice firm. "Yes, Ryan, we are still a family. We will always be a family." Chris sat back, his anger giving way to sorrow. "What happens now?" John sighed, his expression resolute. "We focus on healing and moving forward. We'll start with counseling to help us navigate this. We'll figure out the rest together." The days that followed were filled with a mixture of tension and tentative steps towards healing. John made arrangements for family counseling, hoping that professional guidance would help them all cope with the emotional fallout. Their first session was a mixture of raw emotion and cautious optimism. The therapist, Dr. Mitchell, was a kind and experienced woman who guided them through the process with patience and empathy. "Welcome, everyone," Dr. Mitchell began, her voice soothing. "I understand that you are all going through a very difficult time. My goal is to help you navigate these emotions and find a way to move forward together." Chris spoke first, his voice filled with frustration. "I don't understand how this happened. How could Mom keep this from us for so long?" Dr. Mitchell nodded, her expression understanding. "It is natural to feel angry and betrayed, Chris. Keeping secrets can create deep wounds. Sarah, would you like to share your perspective?" Sarah took a deep breath, her eyes red from crying. "I was afraid. I thought I was protecting everyone by keeping the secret. I see now that it only caused more pain." Ryan's voice was small but determined. "I just want to know that we're still a family, that nothing's going to change." Dr. Mitchell smiled gently at Ryan. It's important to acknowledge that while some things will change, the love and support of your family can remain constant. It is about finding a new normal. John squeezed Ryan's hand, his voice filled with determination. We will always be a family, Ryan, no matter what. The sessions continued, each one peeling back layers of hurt and confusion. They talked about trust, forgiveness, and the future. Slowly, they began to find a sense of stability amidst the chaos. One evening, after a particularly intense session, John and Chris sat on the porch, watching the sunset. The silence between them was heavy but not uncomfortable. "Dad, do you think things will ever be normal again?" Chris asked, his voice quiet. John sighed, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "I don't know if things will ever be the same, Chris, but I believe we can find a new kind of normal. One where we are honest with each other and work through our problems together." Chris nodded, a hint of hope in his eyes. "I want to believe that too." As the weeks passed, the family began to find a rhythm in their new reality. The counseling sessions helped them communicate more openly, and they started to rebuild the trust that had been shattered. John found solace in the support of his sons and the guidance of Dr. Mitchell. He also leaned on Adam and Emily, whose friendship provided a much-needed respite from the emotional turmoil. One afternoon, Emily invited John and the boys over for a barbecue. It was a chance to relax and enjoy each other's company outside of the tense atmosphere of their home. "Thanks for inviting us, Emily," John said as he helped set up the grill. "We needed this." Emily smiled, her eyes warm. "You're always welcome here, John. You and the boys are like family to me." As the evening wore on, laughter and conversation filled the air. For a few hours, they were able to forget the pain and simply enjoy being together. Ryan and Emily's son, Jake, played a game of catch in the yard, their laughter echoing through the warm summer air. Chris and Emily's daughter, Lily, sat at the picnic table, deep in conversation about their favorite books. John watched his sons, a sense of peace washing over him. They were healing, slowly but surely, and he was determined to be there for them every step of the way. Later that night, as they drove home, Ryan spoke up from the back seat. "Dad, today was really fun. I feel like things are getting better." John glanced in the rearview mirror, smiling at his son. "I am glad, Ryan. We're all working hard to make things better." Chris nodded in agreement. "Yeah, it feels like we are starting to find our way." John felt a surge of pride and gratitude. Despite the challenges, they were moving forward, stronger and more united than ever. As they pulled into the driveway, John turned to his sons, his voice filled with conviction. "No matter what happens, we are a family, and we'll get through this together." The boys smiled, their expressions filled with hope. John knew that the road ahead would still have its challenges, but for the first time in a long while, he felt truly optimistic about the future. Chapter 6. Building a Case. John awoke with a sense of purpose, a stark contrast to the turmoil that had clouded his days since the revelation of Sarah's infidelity. The journey through legal preparations and emotional upheaval had been grueling, but he was beginning to see a path forward. Today was another step in that journey as he worked closely with Jessica to build a strong case for custody and asset division. John sat in Jessica's office, surrounded by stacks of documents. Jessica was meticulously going through each piece, highlighting important information and making notes. "We need to ensure that everything is in order," Jessica said, her tone professional yet empathetic. "Every detail matters in a case like this." John nodded, feeling a mixture of determination and anxiety. "I've gathered everything I could find: financial records, emails, texts, anything that might help." Jessica smiled reassuringly. "You're doing great, John. This thoroughness will be crucial. Now let's go over the timeline of events again." As they reviewed the details, John couldn't help but think about how his life had unraveled. The betrayal, the secrets, the uncertainty, all of it had led to this moment. But he was determined to protect his sons and secure a future for them. "John, I want to discuss something important," Jessica said, breaking into his thoughts. "We need to be prepared for any counterclaims Sarah might make. She might try to argue for joint custody or a more favorable financial settlement. John sighed, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. I understand, but my priority is making sure Chris and Ryan have a stable and supportive environment. I'll do whatever it takes to make that happen. Jessica nodded. We'll make a strong case for primary custody. Your involvement in their lives, your stability, and the emotional support you provide will be key points. And remember, we're not just fighting for custody, we are fighting for their well-being. After the meeting, John felt a renewed sense of purpose. He headed home, his mind buzzing with thoughts of the legal battle ahead. As he walked through the front door, he was greeted by the sight of Ryan working on his homework at the kitchen table. Hey, Dad, Ryan said, looking up with a smile. How did the meeting go? John smiled, feeling a surge of pride. It went well, Ryan. We're making progress. Ryan's smile faded slightly. Are we going to be okay, Dad? I mean, with everything that's happening? John walked over and placed a reassuring hand on his son's shoulder. Yes, we are. It's going to be tough, but we're going to get through this. Together. As the weeks passed, John and Jessica continued to build their case. They compiled evidence, prepared testimonies, and strategized for the upcoming court hearings. It was a demanding process, but John felt confident with Jessica's expertise and Adam's support. One evening, after a long day of preparations, John received a call from Emily. Her voice was filled with warmth and concern. John, I've been thinking about you and the boys, Emily said. How are you holding up? John felt a wave of gratitude. Emily had been a constant source of support. We are managing, Emily. It's been tough, but we are making progress. Emily's tone softened. I want you to know that I am here for you, John. If you need anything, don't hesitate to ask. John smiled, feeling a deep sense of appreciation. Thank you, Emily. Your support means a lot to us. Emily hesitated for a moment before continuing. I've been thinking maybe we could get together sometime, just to talk and relax. It might be good for you to take a break from all the stress. John considered her offer, realizing how much he needed a distraction from the relentless pace of his life. That sounds like a great idea, Emily. I'd like that. They arranged to meet the next weekend, giving John something to look forward to amidst the chaos. The anticipation of spending time with Emily brought a sense of normalcy and hope. The weekend arrived, and John found himself at a cozy cafe, waiting for Emily. When she walked in, her smile lit up the room. They sat down, the conversation flowing easily as they caught up on each other's lives. John, I've been so impressed with how you've handled everything, Emily said, her eyes filled with admiration. You've been so strong for your boys. John smiled, feeling a warmth spread through him. It hasn't been easy, but they are my priority. I'll do whatever it takes to make sure they're okay. Emily reached across the table and squeezed his hand. You are a great father, John, and a good friend. I'm glad we have each other. John felt a surge of emotion, realizing how much Emily's friendship meant to him. I am glad too, Emily. Your support has been a lifeline. As they talked, John felt a sense of peace he hadn't experienced in a long time. For a few hours, he was able to set aside the stress and uncertainty, simply enjoying Emily's company. After their meeting, John returned home with a renewed sense of strength. He was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing he had the support of his family and friends. The legal battle intensified as the court date approached. John and Jessica worked tirelessly, preparing for every possible scenario. They reviewed their evidence, rehearsed their arguments, and made sure every detail was covered. On the day of the hearing, John stood outside the courthouse, taking a deep breath. He felt a mix of anxiety and determination, knowing that this was a pivotal moment in his fight for his sons. Jessica placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. We've got this, John. Just remember to stay calm and focused. We are ready. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was tense. John saw Sarah sitting with her attorney, her expression a mix of nervousness and determination. He felt a pang of sorrow, remembering the life they had built together, and the betrayal that had torn it apart. The judge entered, and the proceedings began. Jessica presented their case with confidence and clarity, highlighting John S.'s role as a dedicated father and the stable environment he provided for Chris and Ryan. Sarah S. attorney countered with arguments for joint custody, emphasizing Sarah S.'s desire to remain involved in her children's lives. It was a contentious battle, each side presenting their arguments with passion and conviction. As the hearing progressed, John felt a sense of determination harden within him. He listened to the testimonies, the evidence, and the arguments, knowing that he was fighting for his family's future. When it was John S.'s turn to speak, he stood up, his voice steady and filled with emotion. "Your Honor, I love my sons more than anything in this world. I've done everything I can to provide for them, to support them, and to protect them. They deserve a stable and loving environment, and I am committed to giving them that." The judge listened intently, nodding as John spoke. When he finished, there was a moment of silence before the judge addressed the court. Custody decisions are never easy, especially in cases involving deep emotional wounds. My primary concern is the well-being of the children. After reviewing the evidence and hearing the testimonies, I will take some time to deliberate before making my decision. As the court adjourned, John felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. The waiting would be difficult, but he knew they had presented a strong case. He looked over at Sarah, seeing the uncertainty in her eyes. Despite everything, he hoped they could find a way to co-parent effectively for the sake of their sons. Outside the courthouse, John was greeted by Adam and Emily, their expressions filled with support and encouragement. "You did great, John," Adam said, clapping him on the back. "Now we just have to wait for the judge's decision." Emily hugged him, her eyes filled with warmth. "No matter what happens, we are here for you. You are not alone in this." John nodded, feeling a surge of gratitude for the people who stood by him. "Thank you, both of you. I couldn't have done this without you." As they left the courthouse, John felt a renewed sense of hope. The battle was not over, but he was ready to face whatever came next, knowing he had the support and love of his family and friends. Chapter 7. Emotional Showdown. The courtroom had become a second home to John over the past few months. The constant back and forth between lawyers, the meticulous examination of evidence, and the emotional toll of reliving his worst memories had left him exhausted. But today felt different. Today, something was going to break. John sat beside Jessica, his attorney, as the judge resumed his place on the bench. The final round of testimonies and arguments was about to begin, and John could feel the tension in the room like a physical weight. Sarah was across from him, her face pale and drawn. Her attorney whispered something to her, and she nodded, trying to steady herself. "All rise," the bailiff called, and the judge began the proceedings. "Today, we will hear final arguments and testimonies before I make my decision," the judge announced. "I remind everyone that our primary concern is the well-being of the children involved." Jessica stood, addressing the court with the calm authority that had become her hallmark. "Your Honor, we have presented a case that clearly demonstrates John S.'s capability and dedication as a father. He has provided a stable, loving home for Chris and Ryan, and we believe that awarding him primary custody is in their best interests." Sarah S. attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Linda, rose to her feet. "Your Honor, while we acknowledge John S.'s role in the children's lives, Sarah has been an integral part of their upbringing as well. She deeply regrets her past actions and is committed to being a present and loving mother." The judge nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I would like to hear from John and Sarah directly before we proceed. John, please take the stand." John took a deep breath, standing and making his way to the witness stand. He sat down, facing the judge with a mixture of determination and vulnerability. "John, in your own words, please explain why you believe you should be awarded primary custody," the judge instructed. John cleared his throat, gathering his thoughts. "Your Honor, I love my sons more than anything. I have done everything in my power to provide them with a stable, nurturing environment. I understand that Sarah regrets her actions, but the trust has been broken. My primary concern is ensuring that Chris and Ryan have a secure and supportive home. I believe that staying with me will provide them with the stability they need during this difficult time." The judge nodded, his gaze steady. Thank you, John. Sarah, please take the stand. Sarah's steps were hesitant as she approached the witness stand. She sat down, her hands trembling slightly. Sarah, why do you believe you should share custody of your children? The judge asked. Sarah took a deep breath, her voice shaking. Your Honor, I know I made terrible mistakes. I betrayed John's trust and kept secrets that should never have been hidden. But I love my sons deeply. I want to be part of their lives, to support them and be there for them. I am willing to do whatever it takes to rebuild the trust I lost. John listened, his heart aching with conflicting emotions. He wanted to believe her, but the wounds were still too fresh. He knew what was best for his sons, and he had to stay firm. The judge turned to the attorneys. Are there any final statements before I make my decision? Jessica stood, her voice confident. Your Honor, the evidence speaks for itself. John has demonstrated his unwavering commitment to his children. We believe that awarding him primary custody is in their best interests. Linda followed, her tone measured. Your Honor, Sarah has shown genuine remorse and a desire to make amends. We ask that you consider joint custody, allowing the children to benefit from the love and support of both parents. The judge nodded, his expression thoughtful. Thank you. I will now deliberate and return with my decision. As the judge left the courtroom, the tension in the room was palpable. John returned to his seat beside Jessica, feeling the weight of the moment. It's all out of our hands now, Jessica said quietly. You did everything you could, John. John nodded, trying to steady his nerves. I know. I just want what is best for Chris and Ryan. The wait felt interminable, but finally the judge returned. The room fell silent as he took his seat. After careful consideration, I have reached a decision, the judge began. It is clear that both parents love their children deeply. However, the primary concern is the stability and well-being of Chris and Ryan. Therefore, I am awarding primary custody to John, with Sarah receiving scheduled visitation rights. I believe this arrangement will provide the children with the stability they need while allowing Sarah to remain an active part of their lives. John felt a wave of relief wash over him, mixed with a deep sense of responsibility. He had won the custody battle, but he knew the real work was just beginning. As the courtroom began to clear, John turned to Jessica, gratitude evident in his eyes. Thank you, Jessica. I couldn't have done this without you. Jessica smiled, her professionalism giving way to warmth. You did great, John. Now go and be the best father you can be. John walked over to Sarah, who was still sitting in her chair, tears streaming down her face. Sarah, I know this is hard, but we need to work together for the boys' sake. Sarah nodded, her voice breaking. I know, John. I am so sorry for everything. John felt a pang of sorrow for the life they had lost, but he knew they had to move forward. Let us focus on making things right for Chris and Ryan. As they left the courthouse, John was greeted by Adam and Emily, their faces filled with pride and relief. You did it, John, Adam said, clapping him on the back. I'm so proud of you. Emily hugged him, her eyes shining with emotion. You're an amazing father, John. The boys are lucky to have you. John smiled, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. Thank you, both of you. This is just the beginning, but I know we can make it work. Over the next few weeks, John focused on creating a stable and supportive environment for Chris and Ryan. He worked closely with the family therapist, Dr. Mitchell, to help the boys adjust to their new reality. One evening, after a particularly productive therapy session, John sat with Chris and Ryan in the living room. The tension that had once filled their home was beginning to ease, replaced by a sense of cautious optimism. Dad, can we talk about what's next? Chris asked, his voice steady. John nodded, smiling at his son. Of course, Chris. What is on your mind? Chris glanced at Ryan, who nodded in encouragement. We've been thinking a lot about everything that happened, and we want to make sure we are all okay. Can we plan some family activities, just to spend more time together and heal? John felt a surge of pride and love for his sons. That's a great idea, Chris. We can plan some weekend trips, game nights, whatever you guys want. Ryan smiled, his eyes brightening. I like that, Dad. I think it'll help us all feel better. As they discussed their plans, John felt a sense of hope for the future. They were beginning to heal, to find a new sense of normalcy. The road ahead would still have its challenges, but John knew they could face them together. One Saturday, they decided to go hiking at a nearby state park. The day was filled with laughter, fresh air, and the simple joy of being together. John watched his sons explore the trails, their spirits lifted by the beauty of nature. As they reached a scenic overlook, John took a moment to reflect. The journey had been long and difficult, but they were stronger for it. They had faced their challenges head-on and emerged with a deeper bond and a renewed sense of purpose. That evening, as they sat around a campfire roasting marshmallows, Chris turned to his father. "Dad, I know things will never be the same, but I believe we are going to be okay." John smiled, his heart swelling with love and pride. "I believe that too, Chris. We've come a long way and we'll keep moving forward, together." Ryan nodded, his eyes filled with determination. "We are a family, and nothing can change that." As they sat together, the fire crackling in the night, John felt a deep sense of peace. They were healing, and they had a bright future ahead of them. With the love and support of each other, there was nothing they couldn't overcome. Chapter 8. New Beginnings. The courtroom battle might have ended, but the real journey of rebuilding their lives was just beginning. John knew that the custody decision was only the first step in creating a stable, loving environment for Chris and Ryan. He had to prove every day that he could be both father and mother to his sons, and he was ready for the challenge. One of the first major changes was moving to a new home. The old house held too many painful memories, and John wanted a fresh start for his family. He found a cozy, spacious house in a good neighborhood with excellent schools and plenty of parks nearby. It was a perfect place to begin their new life. As they packed up the old house, Emily was a constant source of support, helping with the move and offering words of encouragement. Her presence was a balm to John's weary soul, and he found himself looking forward to their conversations more and more. "John, you've done an amazing job," Emily said one evening as they packed up the kitchen. "The boys are so lucky to have you." John smiled, feeling a warmth spread through him. "I couldn't have done it without you, Emily. You've been there for us every step of the way." Emily blushed slightly, her eyes shining. "I'm just glad I could help. You and the boys mean a lot to me." Once they were settled in the new house, John focused on creating a sense of normalcy for Chris and Ryan. He established new routines, making sure they had a structured and supportive environment. The boys started at their new schools, and John was relieved to see them adjusting well. Family therapy sessions with Dr. Mitchell continued, helping them navigate their emotions and strengthen their bond. The sessions were tough at times, but John could see the positive impact they were having on his sons. One evening, after a particularly intense therapy session, Chris approached John in the living room. "Dad, can we talk?" John looked up, his heart skipping a beat. "Of course, Chris. What is on your mind?" Chris sat down, his expression serious. "I've been thinking a lot about everything we've been through, and I just wanted to say that I am really proud of you. You've been so strong for us." John felt a lump form in his throat, his eyes misting over. "Thank you, Chris. That means a lot to me. I'm proud of you too. You've been incredibly strong through all of this." Chris nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "I feel like we are finally starting to heal, and I think it's because of you." John pulled his son into a hug, his heart swelling with love. "We did it together, Chris. All of us." As the days turned into weeks, John and Emily grew closer. Their friendship deepened, and it became clear that there was something more between them. One evening, after the boys were in bed, John and Emily sat on the porch, the night air cool and refreshing. "Emily, I want to thank you for everything," John said, his voice filled with emotion. "You've been my rock through all of this." Emily reached out and took his hand, her touch sending a shiver down his spine. "John, you've become so important to me. I care about you and the boys more than you know." John looked into her eyes, seeing the depth of her feelings reflected there. "I care about you too, Emily, more than I can say." As they sat there, hand in hand, John felt a sense of peace and hope. He knew that their journey was far from over, but with Emily by his side, he felt ready to face whatever came next. The boys noticed the growing connection between John and Emily, and they seemed to approve. Ryan, in particular, had formed a close bond with Emily, often seeking her out for advice and support. "Dad, do you think you'll ever get married again?" Ryan asked one evening as they played a board game. John chuckled, ruffling his son's hair. "I don't know, Ryan. Right now I am just focused on making sure we are all happy and healthy. But who knows what the future holds?" Ryan smiled, looking thoughtful. "I think Emily makes you happy, and she makes us happy too." John's heart warmed at his son's words. "She does, Ryan. She really does." As the months passed, John and Emily's relationship blossomed. They spent more time together, sharing their hopes and dreams for the future. Emily was a calming presence in John's life, and he couldn't imagine facing the challenges ahead without her. One sunny afternoon, John and Emily decided to take the boys on a trip to the beach. It was a welcome break from the routine, and they all looked forward to a day of fun and relaxation. As they played in the surf and built sandcastles, John felt a sense of joy and contentment that he hadn't experienced in a long time. The boys laughed and splashed, their spirits lifted by the simple pleasure of the ocean. Emily watched them with a smile, her eyes shining with happiness. "This is perfect, John. Seeing you and the boys so happy makes everything worthwhile." John took her hand, his heart full. "It really is perfect, Emily. Thank you for being a part of our lives." As the sun began to set, they gathered around a beach bonfire, roasting marshmallows and sharing stories. The warmth of the fire and the sound of the waves created a magical atmosphere, and John felt a deep sense of peace. "Dad, this has been the best day ever," Ryan said, his eyes sparkling with joy. John smiled, his heart swelling with love. "I am glad, Ryan. We'll have many more days like this, I promise." As they watched the sun dip below the horizon, John knew that they had come a long way from the darkness and pain that had once overshadowed their lives. They had found a new beginning, filled with hope and promise. Back home, the new routines and traditions they had established brought a sense of stability and comfort. They had weekly family game nights, movie marathons, and weekend outings. John made sure to spend quality time with each of his sons, strengthening their bond and ensuring they felt loved and supported. One evening, as they sat around the dinner table, Chris spoke up. "Dad, I've been thinking about something. I want to start a project, something that we can all work on together." John looked at his son with interest. "That sounds like a great idea, Chris. What do you have in mind?" Chris grinned, his excitement evident. "How about we build a treehouse in the backyard? It could be our special place where we can hang out and make new memories." Ryan's eyes lit up with enthusiasm. "Yeah, that sounds awesome." John felt a surge of pride and happiness. "I think that's a fantastic idea, Chris. Let us do it." Over the next few weekends, they worked on the treehouse together, with Emily often joining in to help. The project became a symbol of their new beginning, a tangible representation of the strength and unity they had found as a family. As they hammered nails and painted walls, they shared stories, laughter, and the occasional frustration. But each moment brought them closer, building not just a treehouse, but also a foundation of love and trust. When the treehouse was finally complete, they celebrated with a small party, inviting Emily and her children. As they climbed up into their new sanctuary, John felt a profound sense of accomplishment. "This is amazing," Chris said, looking around with satisfaction. "We did it, Dad." John nodded, his heart full. "We sure did, Chris. And this is just the beginning." Ryan leaned against his father, his eyes filled with contentment. "I love our new house and our tree house. It feels like home." John hugged his sons, feeling a deep sense of peace. "It is home, Ryan, and no matter what happens, we'll always have each other." As they sat in the treehouse, the sun setting in the distance, John knew that they had found their new normal. It wasn't the life he had imagined, but it was filled with love, hope, and the promise of a brighter future. With Emily by his side and his sons thriving, John felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. They had built something strong and beautiful together, and he knew that their bond would only grow stronger with time. Chapter 9. Resolution and Reconciliation. The sun was setting as John stood on the porch, watching Chris and Ryan play in the yard. Their laughter echoed through the air, a sound that had become increasingly common in their new home. The weight of the past month's struggles was beginning to lift, replaced by a sense of peace and stability. John's phone buzzed in his pocket, and he saw it was a message from Emily. She had been a constant source of support, and their relationship had grown deeper and more meaningful. He smiled as he read her text, inviting him and the boys over for dinner that weekend. As he responded, John felt a wave of gratitude. Emily had become an integral part of their lives, and her children had bonded closely with Chris and Ryan. Their blended families were finding harmony, and the future seemed brighter every day. The next morning, John met with Jessica to finalize the divorce settlement. The legal battle had been arduous, but they were nearing the end. As they reviewed the documents, John felt a mix of relief and sorrow. This was the end of one chapter of his life, but it was also the beginning of a new one. "John, you've handled this with such grace and strength," Jessica said, her tone warm. "You are setting a wonderful example for your boys." John nodded, feeling a sense of accomplishment. "Thank you, Jessica. I couldn't have done it without your help." As they left the office, John felt a sense of closure. The divorce was final, and he could now focus entirely on his sons and their future. He picked them up from school, feeling a lightness in his step that had been absent for too long. "Dad, can we go to the park?" Ryan asked as they drove home. John smiled, glancing at his sons in the rearview mirror. "Absolutely. Let's go enjoy the sunshine." At the park, they played soccer and had a picnic, enjoying the simple pleasures of being together. John watched his sons, their faces filled with joy, and felt a deep sense of contentment. They had come so far, and he was proud of how they had handled everything. That evening, they joined Emily and her children for dinner. The house was filled with laughter and conversation, a stark contrast to the tension that had once dominated John's life. As they sat around the table, John felt a profound sense of gratitude for the new family they were building. "To new beginnings," Emily said, raising her glass. "To new beginnings," John echoed, clinking his glass with hers. The weeks that followed were filled with moments of healing and growth. John continued to focus on his sons, ensuring they felt loved and supported. He also made time for himself, exploring new hobbies and interests that brought him joy. One Saturday, as they worked on the treehouse, John received a call from Sarah. It had been weeks since the Court S decision, and their interactions had been minimal and cordial. "John, can we talk?" Sarah S.'s voice was hesitant but sincere. John felt a mix of emotions. "Of course, Sarah, what is on your mind?" "I have been thinking a lot about everything that has happened," she began. "I want to apologize again for everything I have put you and the boys through. I know I can undo the past, but I want to find a way to make amends." John took a deep breath, his heart heavy. "Sarah, I appreciate your apology. It's going to take time to heal, but I think it's important for the boys that we find a way to move forward." Sarah S.'s voice wavered. "I agree. I want to be a positive presence in their lives. I know it won't be easy, but I am committed to doing whatever it takes." John nodded, feeling a sense of resolution. "Let us start with small steps. We can work on building a new kind of relationship for the sake of Chris and Ryan." They arranged to meet at a neutral location, a quiet cafe, to discuss co-parenting strategies. As they sat across from each other, the tension was palpable, but there was also a sense of determination to move forward. "John, I know I have hurt you deeply," Sarah said, her eyes filled with remorse, "but I want to be there for the boys. I want to support you in raising them." John sighed, his emotions conflicted. "Sarah, the trust between us is broken, and it will take time to rebuild anything resembling a cooperative relationship. But for the boys' sake, I am willing to try." They discussed schedules, responsibilities, and ways to ensure the boys felt secure and loved. It was a difficult conversation, but it was a necessary step towards a more stable future. As they left the cafe, John felt a sense of cautious optimism. They had a long way to go, but he was willing to put in the effort for his sons. Back home, John shared the news with Chris and Ryan. "Your mom and I are going to work on being better co-parents," he explained. "We both love you very much, and we want to make sure you feel supported and happy." Chris nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I think that is a good idea, Dad. It is important for us to see you both working together." Ryan smiled, his eyes bright. "Yeah, it's going to be okay." John felt a surge of pride and love for his sons. They were resilient and strong, and he was determined to support them in every way possible. The months passed, and John and Sarah found a rhythm in their co-parenting. It wasn't always easy, but they made a conscious effort to communicate and prioritize their children's well-being. Gradually, the tension eased, replaced by a sense of cooperation and mutual respect. Emily continued to be a pillar of support, and their relationship grew deeper with each passing day. They spent weekends together, blending their families and creating new traditions. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the stars, John took Emily's hand. "Emily, I can't imagine going through this without you. You've brought so much light into our lives." Emily smiled, her eyes shining with love. "And you've brought so much joy into mine, John. I love you." John felt a warmth spread through him, a sense of peace and happiness that he hadn't felt in a long time. "I love you too, Emily." As they sat together, surrounded by the sounds of their children playing and the gentle hum of the night, John knew that they had found something truly special. Their journey had been filled with challenges and heartbreak, but it had also brought them closer together. The boys thrived in their new environment, excelling in school and forming strong friendships. They continued their therapy sessions with Dr. Mitchell, and the positive changes were evident in their confidence and happiness. One afternoon, as they worked on a new project in the treehouse, Chris turned to John. "Dad, I feel like we are finally in a good place, like we can handle anything that comes our way." John smiled, his heart swelling with pride. "I feel the same way, Chris. We've come a long way and we were stronger for it." Ryan looked up from his work, his eyes filled with determination. "We are a team, and nothing can break us." As they finished their project and admired their handiwork, John felt a profound sense of accomplishment. They had faced their challenges head-on and emerged stronger and more united. That evening, they gathered around the dinner table, sharing stories and laughter. The warmth and love that filled their home was a testament to their resilience and strength. As they cleared the table and settled in for a movie night, John felt a deep sense of peace. They had found their way through the darkness and emerged into the light, stronger and more connected than ever. With Emily by his side and his sons thriving, John knew that they had a bright future ahead. They had built something beautiful together, and he was excited to see what the next chapter would bring. As the credits rolled on their movie, Ryan snuggled up to John. "Dad, I love our new life. It feels right." John hugged his son, his heart full. "I love it too, Ryan, and I'm so proud of how far we've come." Chris leaned in, his eyes shining with happiness. "We are a family, and that's all that matters." John smiled, feeling a profound sense of gratitude. "Yes, we are, and we'll always be here for each other, no matter what." As they sat together, the future felt bright and full of promise. They had faced their challenges and come out stronger, and John knew that they could handle anything that came their way. With love, support, and a renewed sense of purpose, they were ready to embrace whatever the future held. And for the first time in a long while, John felt truly hopeful and at peace. Chapter 10. Looking Forward. The seasons changed, marking the passage of time in their new lives. The past year's hardships had forged an unbreakable bond among John, Chris, Ryan, and Emily. As spring turned to summer, the future seemed bright and full of possibilities. One warm summer evening, the family gathered in their backyard for a barbecue. The air was filled with the aroma of grilled food and the sound of laughter. John manned the grill, flipping burgers with practiced ease, while Emily set the picnic table with fresh salads and homemade lemonade. Chris and Ryan were playing catch with Emily's children, Jake and Lily, their shouts of joy echoing through the yard. It was a picture of happiness, a testament to how far they had come. "Dad, you need to try this," Ryan called out, running over with a plate of freshly grilled vegetables. John took a bite, nodding appreciatively. Delicious, Ryan. You've got a talent for this. Ryan beamed with pride, returning to his game. John watched his sons, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. They had come through the storm stronger and more united than ever. As they sat down to eat, John raised his glass. To family and to new beginnings, to family, everyone echoed, clinking their glasses together. The meal was filled with lively conversation and laughter. They shared stories, made plans for future adventures, and celebrated the bonds they had built. Emily's presence was a source of warmth and comfort, her laughter blending seamlessly with the rest of the family. After dinner, they gathered around a fire pit, roasting marshmallows and sharing their dreams for the future. The flickering flames cast a warm glow, creating an atmosphere of intimacy and connection. "Dad, I've been thinking," Chris said, his tone thoughtful. "I want to study psychology in college. I want to help other families like ours." John felt a surge of pride. "That's a wonderful goal, Chris. You'll be great at it." Chris smiled, his eyes shining with determination. "Thanks, Dad. Your support means everything to me," Ryan chimed in, his voice filled with excitement. "And I want to become a chef. I love cooking and making people happy with food." John laughed, ruffling his son's hair. "You'll be an amazing chef, Ryan. I can't wait to see what you create." Emily squeezed John's hand, her eyes filled with love. "You've done such an incredible job raising them, John. They are both so driven and compassionate." John's heart swelled with gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you, Emily. You've been my rock." As the night wore on, they shared more dreams and hopes, the conversation flowing easily. The challenges they had faced had only made them stronger, and the future felt full of promise. The next morning, John woke early, a sense of anticipation buzzing through him. He had planned a surprise for the family, a weekend getaway to a cabin by the lake. It was a chance to relax, reconnect, and create new memories. "Wake up, everyone! We are going on an adventure," John called out, his excitement contagious. The boys tumbled out of bed, their eyes wide with curiosity. "Where are we going, Dad?" Ryan asked, bouncing with energy. "You'll see," John said with a grin. "Pack your bags for a weekend by the lake." As they loaded up the car, the air was filled with excitement and anticipation. The drive to the lake was filled with music, laughter, and playful banter. When they arrived, the sight of the serene lake surrounded by lush forests took their breath away. "This is amazing, Dad," Chris exclaimed, his eyes wide with wonder. John smiled, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. "I thought we could all use a little getaway." They spent the weekend swimming, hiking, and exploring the beautiful surroundings. Evenings were spent around the campfire, sharing stories and roasting marshmallows. The time away from the pressures of everyday life brought them even closer together. One afternoon, as they sat by the lake, Emily turned to John. "This has been perfect, John. Thank you for planning this." John took her hand, his heart full. "I'm just glad we can all be here together." As the sun set on their final night at the lake, John gathered everyone for a special announcement. "I've been thinking a lot about the future," he began, his voice filled with emotion. "And I want you all to know how much you mean to me. This past year has been incredibly challenging, but we've come through it stronger and more united. I want to spend the rest of my life with you, Emily. Will you marry me?" Emily's eyes filled with tears, her smile radiant. "Yes, John, I would love to marry you." The boys cheered, their faces lighting up with happiness. "This is the best news ever," Ryan exclaimed, hugging his father. Chris nodded, his expression filled with pride. "Congratulations, Dad. We are so happy for you." As they celebrated, John felt a profound sense of peace and fulfillment. They had faced their challenges head-on, and now they were looking forward to a bright and beautiful future together. The wedding was a small, intimate ceremony by the lake, attended by close family and friends. The setting was perfect, the love and support of their blended family creating an atmosphere of joy and celebration. As John and Emily exchanged vows, John felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought them to this moment. They had built something beautiful from the ashes of their past, and he was excited to see what the future held. After the ceremony, They celebrated with a reception filled with laughter, dancing, and heartfelt toasts. The boys gave a moving speech, expressing their love and gratitude for their parents and the new family they had created. "Dad, Emily, we love you both so much," Chris said, his voice filled with emotion. "Thank you for everything you've done for us. We are so happy to be a family." Ryan nodded, his eyes shining with tears. "This is the best day ever. We are so lucky to have you." John and Emily embraced their sons, their hearts overflowing with love. They had come through the darkness and emerged into the light, stronger and more united than ever. As the sun set on their wedding day, they stood by the lake, watching the reflection of the stars on the water. John held Emily close, feeling a profound sense of peace and happiness. "We did it, Emily," he said softly. "We've created something beautiful." Emily smiled, her eyes filled with love. "Yes, we have, and the best is yet to come." As they stood together, surrounded by their children and the beauty of nature, John knew that their future was bright and full of promise. They had faced their challenges with courage and love, and now they were ready to embrace whatever came next. With their family by their side and the strength of their love to guide them, John and Emily looked forward to a future filled with joy, adventure, and endless possibilities. They had built a new life together, and they were ready to face whatever the future held, knowing that they could overcome anything as long as they had each other.